And it's my pleasure now to introduce again Reverend Megan Lynes.
Come in. Come into this place which we make happy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place
Of our worship.
This is called a prayer among friends. And I invite us into the spirit of quiet and meditation. Among other wonders of our lives, we are alive with one another. We walk here in the light of this unlikely world that isn't ours for long. May we spend generously the time we are given. May we enact our responsibilities as thoroughly as we enjoy our pleasures. May we see with clarity, may we seek a vision that serves all beings. May we honor the mysteries surpassing our sight. And may we hold in our hands the gift of good work and bear it forth whole, as we were born forth by a power we praise to this one earth, this homeland of all we love. I asked 100 painters and 100 poets how to paint sunlight on the face of life. Their answers were ambiguous and ingenuous, as if they were all guarding trade secrets. Whereas it seemed to me all you have to do is conceive of the whole world and all humanity as a kind of artwork, a site-specific artwork, an art project of the God of light, the whole earth and all that is in it, to be painted with light. And the first thing you have to do is paint out postmodern painting. And the next thing you have to do is to paint yourself in your true colors, in primary colors, as you see them, without whitewash. Paint yourself as you see yourself, without makeup, without masks. Then paint your favorite people and animals with your brush loaded with light. And be sure you get the perspective right and don't fake it, because one false line leads to another. And don't forget to paint the faces of all those who lived their lives as bearers of light. Paint their eyes and the eyes of every animal, and the eyes of men and women known only for the light of their minds. Paint the light of their eyes, the light of sunlit laughter, the song of eyes, the song of birds in flight. And remember that the light is within if it is anywhere, and you must paint from the inside. And when you've finished your painting, stand back, astonished. Stand back and observe the life on earth that you've created, the lighted life on earth that you've created, a new, brave world. When I walked in, I'm sure lots of people have walked in and just thought, wow, look at these marble walls, and it's really neat. And I am glad that this is not postmodern painting. This is 1847, and it looks wonderful, and you look wonderful, and you're not a trompe l'oeil. They couldn't have painted you in. But it is really good to be with you. Kate and I enjoyed going to the Arlington Street Church together as folks in our young 20s, and went there and sat in the pews and felt held in community. And she started a Soul in the City group, and that was really neat. And after a while, both of us went off to seminary, and we went our ways through that, and we fell out the other side of seminary and the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and I think neither of us ever believed we'd each be serving congregations in Provincetown and Bedford, and you know, what makes a minister's job a joy is the people in the congregation. So Kate and I share that love together, and it is really good to be with her congregation and your congregation. So thank you for having me. The first book I ever stayed up past midnight reading as a kid was A Wrinkle in Time. My mom or my dad must have turned out the light at 9 or 10, and I huddled underneath the blankets reading with a flashlight. And this book was about a girl named Meg, and she had braces, and she was smart but awkward. All of those things, just like me. The plot was magical, the characters especially easy to relate to, and as a first brush with metaphysics, it was a good one. First published in 1962, A Wrinkle in Time is still one of the best-loved sci-fi fantasy stories for children. Did any of you ever read this book, A Wrinkle in Time? Some, I see some. Oh, in the back. Yeah, I loved this book. It's good at any age, really, and there's 6 in the series. Madeleine L'Engle sends the children on a mission to rescue their father, traveling through the universe by means of a tesseract, a 5th-dimensional phenomenon explained as being similar to folding the fabric of space and time. There in the darkness, the thought of time travel boggled my mind, but perhaps this was because in order to think about entering another reality, I had to recognize myself as part of this one. It was the first time I'd ever thought about myself as being a specific part of a universe, with physical elements like bones and nerves that caused me to exist and made me alive. I can remember through my child's eye trying to picture traveling through the galaxy we are in and arriving at the edge of it. I could see all the stars zipping by me as they do on old Windows screensavers, you know, like that. Or maybe if you were a lover of Star Trek, it was that the stars zipping by, and I suddenly realized if I got to the edge of our galaxy, there would still be no end. Space goes on forever and ever, and so does time. Even now I can feel the vertigo of arriving at Milky Way's end and falling into the beginning of endlessness. I could stop right there at the edge, but the stars would go on and on and on. It was my first awareness of being temporal in eternity. Well, that was about enough of a mind-blowing concept for a 5th grader, and I scurried off down the stairs and found my parents, who were probably not very happy that I was up so late. There are, I'm sure, people in this very room who are quite knowledgeable about quantum physics, and I am not one of those people. I can't tell you any dimensions past the 3rd, but the concept of time itself has always intrigued me. Of course, there are many ways to think about time. Race against the clock, measure it as a part of who we've been and where we are headed to. Escape from it by choosing an activity so captivating that hours pass in the shake of a tail, or step out of it somehow, becoming part of eternity, whether that is through molecular reorganization, like a dying leaf turning into soil, or through an awareness of the mind, becoming one with all being. But let's start with time in its simplest form. Chronos time. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us that there is a time for everything, and a reason for every activity under heaven. But these days, that hardly feels true. Has anyone heard of time compression? It's okay, I hadn't either. It's a bit like making beans in your pressure cooker. You get the same product, but in less time, except this is a technique used in film. For 2 decades or more, when a movie made for the big screen is adapted for television, there's usually some editing necessary. There's editing for bad language or to get rid of certain scenes and to make room for ads. And then to shorten the film even more, the time compression process electronically slices milliseconds out of the film, about 1,200 times every minute. This last edit shortens the film another 5 minutes or so, and no one can even notice a difference. Not a word of dialogue is lost, and no chipmunk effect either. Does it feel like somebody is doing this to your days? Shortening your hours so that you can't accomplish what you had originally planned to do. Time has become a thief in the night. This is, of course, not the way that time works. There are the same number of hours for everyone in each day, but the pressures of keeping up with society have increased substantially in the last decade alone. I don't really have to tell you the statistics, but I'll tell you a funny example. The other day I was driving along, I came to a stoplight, and I looked over, and the woman in the next car was brushing her teeth in the front seat. And I thought, that's okay, I've actually been there myself. And then I looked in the back seat, and her 2 kids were sitting there brushing their teeth too. So it was very efficient, but it looked really ridiculous. I mention this because we can get to feeling really horrible about how much we can't accomplish in one day. It's society that pressures us to race like this. In many countries, as you know, everyone takes a nap after lunch. For a good siesta. But it doesn't only happen in Spain. When I studied in Taiwan during college, I was having an internship in this high-powered financial company in the World Trade Center. So everyone was dressed to the nines. They arrived like clockwork. They worked till lunch. They ate their lunch for maybe 15 minutes. And then there was a hall monitor who turned off the lights in the entire, there were lots of cubicles, but short, so you could see everybody. Turned off the lights. Everybody, from the person pushing papers to the whatever their version of CEO was, put their head on their desk and took a nap. And I took a nap too. That's one thing I did do. I just couldn't believe it, and that was the late 90s, but I don't know if we have anything like that in the States like that today. I don't know if it happens in corporate America, but it should. Everyone was much more productive and less grouchy after a good nap. So if you are someone who finds time for a nap, or you come to Provincetown to relax for the weekend or the week, or you take a walk, or you have a good conversation with a friend in the middle of a very hurried day, you are doing something noteworthy and against the status quo. This pulls back the lid on the pressure cooker and allows us to decompress and become more present to the life we are in the middle of living right this very moment. There are so many ways to relate to time. On birthdays, we become joyful or morose. At the start of a new year, many of us take stock of our lives and ask ourselves what we've accomplished or what we hope to do in the year to come. When we're feeling low or adrift or out of sync somehow, we wonder what is worth getting up for, what to strive for or let go of, what to change in our lives to make things better. Some of us face terribly impossible life situations where time is not on our side. On the other hand, time can be a motivator, and we find ourselves using deadlines to our advantage, working most productively in the last moments before something is due. We motivate ourselves sometimes by fearing time will run out. When you think about time as a factor in your life, what comes to mind? Here is a non-exhaustive list, and it goes through the filter of my perpetual questions. So I want it to work for you. You can find your set of questions about this. I'll start with mine, and I hope yours add in. How did I let myself get this busy? Why is my work stealing my time? How am I using the free time that I have? Am I leading a good life? Am I using my time for the common good? Is another culture's way of life a better way to spend our days? Am I in touch with the seasons of the year and the seasons of my life? Is there a way I could lengthen my time on earth or increase my enjoyment of the time I have? How can I manage my time better and not feel that it rules me? Or am I at peace with time? What will I be when I grow up? If I knew how long I have left to live, would I change anything about my life? What messages about time am I sending my children or my grandchildren? If my loved ones have lived their time and are now gone, how can I come to peace with that? If time goes on without end and I am no more, is there more? Could I or others I love be a part of that more? In high school, there were 3 courses I regret not being able to take: dimensions of food, dimensions of love, and dimensions of time. The classes had newly been created for 10th graders, and I was a junior already. I remember that on the second day of classes, the students in dimensions of time were bringing in objects that related to their first class discussion. It was like a visual brainstorm. One girl had her grandfather's pocket watch that her family had stopped on purpose the day he died. One boy brought in his bucket list of things he wanted to do before he got really old. Drive was at the top of the list. I hope he wasn't thinking that 17 was really old, but who knows? Another brought a telephone cord. Remember the curly-whirly kind, which represented the connection of 2 people's thoughts, explaining that both people with receivers in hand were hearing each other's voice moments after the words had already been spoken, so that the conversation was both in the present and in the past at the same time. Whoa! Another person had an old black and white photo from her immigrant grandparents. Another time, another place, but still a part of her, she said. There are 2 words used for time in the Greek New Testament. One is clock time, chronos, the steady progression of seconds, minutes, hours, and days. Our watches and calendars refer to chronos time. The other word is kairos, which means an appointed time, an opportune moment, or a due season. This is the kind of time filled with possibilities. We have a brief opportunity to shepherd our kids when they're still young. When a friend is experiencing pain, we have a brief window of time in which to reach out to them. Sitting beneath a gentle oak, we let Kairos bring our awareness to the tickling grass and watch these particular birds flying by right in this moment. I'd like to share with you a favorite poem by the poet Wendell Berry, who writes in his own way about living in Kairos time. It's called A Timbered Choir. I go among the trees and sit still. All my stirring becomes quiet around me like circles on water. My tasks lie in their places where I left them, asleep like cattle. Then what is afraid of me comes and lives a while in my sight. What it fears in me leaves me, and the fear of me leaves it. It sings and I hear its song. Then what I am afraid of comes. I live for a while in its sight. What I fear in it leaves it, and the fear of it leaves me. It sings and I hear its song. After days of labor, mute in my consternations, I hear my song at last, and I sing it. As we sing, the day turns, the trees move. Kairos time requires this kind of awareness, feeling what comes to heart and mind most presently. Recently, I read a book called A Year to Live, and the author, Stephen Levine, talks about his son Noah, who worked as a medical technician in a hospital. Noah was the fellow who administered the AIDS tests and 2 weeks later pronounced the results. I can't really imagine a harder job. He saw part of his job as reminding patients that while waiting 2 weeks to hear whether they have a fatal degenerative disease can put a strain on the mind, it was also an opportunity for the heart, for insight and reflection on priorities, goals, and desires. He recommended that the patient ask themselves 2 questions. First, if you receive a positive diagnosis, what will you do next? Who would you share this disturbing news with? And what changes might you make in your life? The second question was, if you find you don't have the AIDS virus, that you have a second chance, so to speak, what will you do with your life then? Kairos time, an opportunity to live with awareness and gratitude. The author, John Kabat-Zinn, titled his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, and this mindset resonates with me. Time is steady and constant. It's not an opponent in a game of chess. Though we may get vertigo standing at the edge of our Milky Way, looking back at our planets and stars and forward into endlessness, we are always nowhere but exactly here. This moment that you and I are experiencing right now together has never been before and will never be again. It is new, and then it is gone as soon as I say it, but it has been, and therefore, even though we are now already in the next moment, in this moment, we recall the past and know our life is made up of these moments, each one new for just a tiny little while. Rabindranath Tagore said, "The butterfly counts not months but moments, and has time enough." We are born, live out our days or months or years if we are lucky, and then cease. How aware we are of our existence and our aliveness is up to us. Some of you may have heard of the late Reverend Ken Patton, who served at the Charles Street Church in Boston. Some of you may know that Patton took a fusty universalism and made it into a religion for one world. It's been said that he was a crusty, impossible man. He liked humanity much more than he liked people, and he was also a genius. He filled Charles Street Church with art from the world's religions. The chancel featured a library of global scriptures. He moved the pews so that they faced one another, and in the chancel archway in day-glow colors, he painted the Andromeda galaxy for all to see, the farthest thing in our universe visible to the human eye. And then at the other end of the sanctuary, he installed a small model of the atom. Now, the atom may not be the smallest thing that the human eye can see, but still, it's pretty darn small. And I can hear it that someone out there is just thinking of things like quarks and Higgs boson and those things. And they are really small. And with the pews facing the center, he put an image of the earth on the floor, right in the middle, holy ground, right where your feet could touch it. What you have is a sanctuary that resonates between macrocosm and microcosm, the infinite and the finite. We exist in a dynamic cosmos, feet on the ground, poised in a universe that resonates between Andromeda and the atom, the infinite and the finite, the permanent and the transient. Religion, just like science, is a place where we get to contemplate existence, impermanence, and all that is in between. Of the questions on that short list I read about time a moment or two ago, Ponderings About Time, this one nudges me the most. If time goes on without end, and I am no more, is there more? And also, could I or others I love be a part of that more, somehow? Growing up Unitarian Universalist, I remember an entire year of Sunday school devoted to the question, why do bad things happen? A reoccurring question for us was, what happens when we die? Time keeps moving, but where do we go? It was a deepening year for many of us. Just recently, our 5th and 6th graders in Bedford wrote questions to the ministers, and many of their questions fell into this realm too. Is heaven real? They asked. What can I do if I want to believe that I will see my grandma again, but I don't think that I will? Challenging questions. But because the questions are on the table, there's room for conversation. They are asking what we, you-yous, believe, what we can count on when we're scared or unsure. In 8th grade, they visit other local places of worship in the Building Bridges program. It used to be called Church Across the Street, and then Faith Across the Street. The 9th graders are asked to write their own credo, their statement of belief, which is a daunting task at any age. So these young teens, like all teens, are in a formational stage, finding their own thoughts and ideas. In fact, let's be honest, we are all in a formational stage over and over again throughout our lives. We don't ever really grow out of it. When I served as a chaplain in a hospital, there was rarely a day that went by when someone wasn't trying to figure out what happens when we die. Faced with our own mortality, we cannot help but wonder and ponder about our impermanence. Every day we practice living. Dying, for many of us, remains a question mark, or just an unpracticed art. A recent Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life states that 74% of Americans believe in life after death, and with equal number of people believing that heaven is a physical place where people who have lived good lives are eternally rewarded. I guess I was surprised at how high that number is. But maybe I shouldn't be. Here in this sanctuary, you embark together on a search for truth and meaning each and every week, recalling Francis David's words, "We need not think alike to love alike." Depending on how we qualified the question about life after death, I bet we'd get a wide array of answers as well. But I would ask you this. If a young person in your life asks you for your thoughts on the matter, don't dodge the question. When my best friend in my freshman year of college died in a car accident, I felt the questions rise to a fevered pitch. What's next? Heaven? Reincarnation? Rejoining with an oversoul? Ashes to ashes? Memories living on? Nothing? I sought out people I trusted to talk to because I simply wanted something to bump up against in my mind's confusion. The person I trusted most to tell me what she thought was the mentor I had chosen for my coming-of-age program in 9th grade. She would tell me her truth, even if it didn't sound like the truth others would say. She embodied we need not think alike to love alike. She didn't just stop with a question mark, or to say even to question truly is an answer. She figured telling me her thoughts would help me find my thoughts. I remember we took a walk in conservation land, the cold wind biting our ears. Jen's physical being is gone, she said. But love is eternal. There is no way to measure love, and no one can take it from you. Your friend will be with you as long as you love her. And it is really, awfully, terribly sad that she is gone. It was one answer among many, perhaps one that many of us would agree with, but it was the one that felt raw and real and honest, and she didn't make up fluff, and she didn't say, I don't know, I guess we'll find out someday. She told me her truth, and it made sense to me then, and it makes sense to me now. The author of A Wrinkle in Time, Madeleine L'Engle, who also writes books for adults on matters of the spirit, expresses it this way. The earth will never be the same again. Rock, water, tree, iron share this grief. As distant stars participate in pain, a candle snuffed, a falling star or leaf, a human death, oh, this particular loss is heaven mourned. For if no angel cried, if this small one was tossed away as dross, the very galaxies would have lied. How shall we sing our love's song now, in this strange land where all are born to die? Each tree and leaf and star show how the universe is part of this one cry, that every life is noted and is cherished, and nothing loved is ever lost or perished. I am so grateful to have had a church very much like the UUMH community here, that encouraged intergenerational connections and mentoring. Mentors can be older and wiser, but of course, age isn't all that's important. Each of us can be a mentor to someone in our lives, if we choose it. Everyone needs someone to trust when they are confused and sad. I know also that in this very room, there are more truths than just one about what matters about our time on earth and what happens when we die. This congregation, more than any congregation I know, knows about death. And because of this history, you also know about great love. What you've figured out about existence and eternity, the atom and the Andromeda, is real and true for you, and that resonates best in a beloved community like this one. Do seek and speak your truth in love, so that none of us are left to ponder or walk alone. I will close with one last poem about the eternal, written by the exiled Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. This body is not me. I am not limited by this body. I am life without boundaries. I have never been born, and I have never died. Look at the ocean and the sky filled with stars, manifestations from my wondrous true mind. Since before time I have been free. Birth and death are only doors through which we pass, sacred thresholds on our journey. Birth and death are a game of hide and seek. So laugh with me, hold my hand. Let us say goodbye. Say goodbye to meet again soon. We meet today, we will meet again tomorrow. We will meet at the source every moment. We will meet each other in all forms of life. Just like asking 100 painters and 100 poets how to paint sunlight on the face of life, we find there is no end to ideas about what it means to be alive, to exist despite all challenges in our own miraculous yet temporal body. It is hard enough to stand in the moment we are in, meeting again at the source of existence, which is now. But we must, in addition, paint ourselves as we see ourselves, without whitewash, without faked perspective. Kendall Gibbons, a UU minister, once said, "We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all our wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain, in its yearning, in its praise." This life in all its dimensions, past, present, future, is the one that matters. This is the Kairos time we are living in. And of course, living in this one wild and precious moment in this beloved community with all of you is what matters most. After days of labor mute in my consternations, I hear my song at last, and I sing it. As we sing, the day turns, the trees move. May it be so. And let the people say, Amen.